Hello, and welcome to part two of our series of videos on Bash scripting. In this video, we will be discussing defining and using variables and arguments in Bash. First, we will show how to define and refer to variables in Bash. Then we will discuss a set of variables called system variables that are defined by the system before you log into your shell, into your environment. Finally, we're going to talk about how to define and use input arguments in your Bash script. At the end of this video, as with all the other videos in this series, we will then ask a question concerning the concepts we discuss from the slides and create and run a Bash program on Quest. So the Bash variable is defined very similar to how variables are defined in other programming languages like Python, R, and MATLAB. The key difference is that the syntax really matters. That is, you cannot have spaces around the equal sign. So you have to do my variable equals a string, a character, a float with no spaces. The other key difference when defining a variable in Bash is that when you refer to the variable later on in your program, you refer to it by putting a $ in front of the name of the variable. So most programming languages, if you define my variable, you would just refer to it later on as my variable, but not in Bash. In addition, we want to be very conscious of system variables when we are writing Bash programs. So these are variables that are defined by the system to make our use of interactive Bash and Bash scripting simpler. For instance, programs that you might be familiar to calling from the command line in Bash, like pwd and sed, the only reason that you're able to call those programs is that the variable path has been defined with a colon-separated list of directories for Bash to search for that program in. So you can see here that when we call sed, what we're really calling is the program that lives in the user bin directory. And so this might make sense because when you call pwd, there isn't actually a program or a file called pwd inside the folder you run that command. And so the only reason Bash knows about its existence is because of this path variable. Finally, you can define input arguments in your Bash script. So the way that you define an input argument is by the $1 notation. So if you use $1, that indicates that your script takes in a single positional argument. You could do $1 and $2, which would indicate that it takes exactly 2 arguments. So for instance, you could do bash my script argument 1 space argument 2, and $1 would be argument 1 and $2 would be argument 2. If you don't know how many input command line arguments your program or your script is going to take, you can use the $at notation to indicate that this script will take in any number of input arguments. It could be 1, it could be 20. Okay, so to conclude this video, we are going to write a Bash script on Quest that defines a Bash variable internally inside the script, makes use of a system-defined Bash variable that we don't have to define because it's already been defined, as well as make use of a set of input arguments. Okay, so I am on Quest in my shell. I'm going to go into a folder that I've already made for the video tutorials. And I'm going to write Bash script called variables.sh. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is define a variable, a bash variable. So I'm going to do my variable 1 equals hello, I am a variable. Okay. The second thing I'm going to do is make use of a variable that has been defined on the system. So I'm going to print the values for a couple of these system variables, PWD and home. So these are very convenient because one refers to your home directory, and the other refers to the directory you're currently in on the system. And then finally, I'm going to make use of an input argument. Okay, so I'm actually going to do, I'm going to define 2 input arguments. So my input var 1, which is going to equal the first positional input argument, and my input var 2, which is going to equal the second positional argument. Okay, and I'm simply going to print the contents of those 2 variables. So again, when I refer to a variable, I put the $ out in front of it. Okay. var2. And then I'm also going to print this variable was defined locally inside the script. Okay, and that was my variable 1. And I'm going to also add in that these variables were passed on the command line. Okay, so I have 3 types of variables that I'm using in this bash program. Ones that are passed on the command line, ones that I've defined internally within my .sh, my bash program, and ones that have been defined by the system that I've not defined but can use inside of my script. Okay, so I'm going to call this program. So you have an interpreter, bash, the name of the file, and then the 2 commands. So argument 1, argument 2. So that concludes this video. I'm going to leave us with a slide here at the end with a possible answer to our exercise. I encourage you at the end of this video to also explore writing a very simple bash script that answers, that does these 3 things: defines and makes use of an internally defined variable, makes use of a variable that's defined at the system level, and makes use of 1 or more input arguments. All right, I hope everyone will join me for part 3 of this series, which is going to be on bash loops, and will be coming next. Have a nice day.